Marriage, by its very institution, must take place only between two, that is, a man and a woman. Of the two, one flesh is formed. By the will of God, the nuptial bond is so intimate and strongly united that none among men can undo or break it. This is the truth about marriage exposed by Christ himself and summarized by Pope Leo XIII at the end of the 19th century. At the time, what surrounded Europe was the threat of divorce. Today, there are so many evils that surround the world that even the concepts of marriage, and even man and woman, with the ideology of gender, were put in check. It is not, therefore, unique to our time that people are scandalized by Christian preaching on marriage. When Jesus explained to the Jews that divorce was only permitted by the Mosaic law because of the hardness of their hearts, and that it was not so in the beginning, firmly established that man cannot separate what God has joined together, his own disciples were impressed. If such is the condition of a man with respect to a woman, it is better not to marry. In response to this question, Jesus not only kept what he said in full, but also stated elsewhere that adultery is not committed only with deeds, but also with the heart. It is clear that the disciples' reaction is not comparable to that of the men of this century. While the former wanted to avoid marriage in order to serve God better, they later flee the altar to better serve themselves. If such is the condition of a man with respect to a woman, it is better to remain single. If such is the condition of man to respect a woman, it is better to live alone. In fact, statistics show that the number of formal marriages has decreased in various parts of the world. On the contrary, the so-called stable unions, which only have the name of stable, are the new wave of the moment. This is the culture of the provisional, so denounced by Pope Francis in his speeches. We live in a culture in which more and more people renounce marriage as a public commitment. This revolution in customs and morals has often waved the flag of freedom, but in reality has brought spiritual and material devastation. What for some followers of Christ was just a scare or question is increasingly a reality in the modern world. People no longer want to get married. The Catechism recognizes that it may seem difficult and even impossible to be attached to a human being for a lifetime. However, the Church must remain faithful to her Lord and Founder without pretending to change a single letter of evangelical doctrine. Like Christ, she should not be afraid of appearing as a sign of contradiction, since true love for souls can never do without the proclamation of the truth, even if it seems harsh or difficult to follow. In the teaching of blessed Paul seeks not to minimize the salutary doctrine of Christ in any way is a form of eminent charity toward souls. One could even argue that, in this way, with its moral intransigence, the Catholic Church would be losing faithful, apart from the little fidelity of those who leave Peter as bold, for not accepting the precepts signed by Jesus himself. This is an important issue. If it taught something different in matters of the family, the Church would certainly win the sympathy of many, gain the favor of the media, and even increase its number of believers. But at what price? What should be the greatest concern of the Church? Increase her tithe or lead the souls to a real encounter with Christ? Having a large number of people in the churches or increasing the size of the mystical body of Christ, the Church with a capital I. The Church's, therefore, Christ's longing is that man, defining himself, reach the fullness of his being, not that he be a permanent walking metamorphosis, with no direction and no real goal. In the culture of the provisional, of the relative, many preach that the important thing is to enjoy the moment. That is not worth committing yourself for a lifetime, making definitive choices forever, since you don't know what that holds tomorrow. In view of this, I ask you to be revolutionaries. I ask you to go against the current, yes, in this I ask you to rebel against this culture of the provisional that deep down believes that you are not capable of taking responsibility, believes that you are not capable of truly loving. With her preaching, the Church constantly takes up the voice of Christ and calls souls to consider that very high price for which they were bought, and the very great vocation to which they were called. To respond to these appeals that seem to come only from the mouths of men, but actually come from the mouth of God Himself, requires courage and perseverance. Through original sin, we tend more easily to dissolution than perfection, to sin than to virtue, but through baptism we are called to magnanimity, with greatness of soul. Let us accept the call of Christ and the Church, and let us not be afraid to risk our lives in definitive decisions, aiming at a true life which will never end.